In today's episode, I wanted to focus on the idea of morals and presence. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because morals has been a really big unraveling for me in like my coaching journey. Actually, one of the hardest things for me in this journey has been facing my whys, because like in coaching, a lot of the work that you're doing is inner work. It's really like looking with like taking a mirror to your psyche and looking at who shows up um in the room that day, and like what do they have to say. And a lot of the time, like the different personalities that we hold in our being, they view the world in a very particular way. You know, there are things that are just black and white for us based on who we are and where we've grown up and like kind of the things that we've experienced, that we attach ourselves to ideas that, depending on where you stand, will either make you my friend or my foe. And a lot of the time, like these ideas and these morals that we hold on to, sort of like our inner law almost, they say a lot about like who we're trying to be, but they also just say a lot about the parts of ourselves that we shame, the parts of ourselves that experience guilt, the parts of ourselves that we love and celebrate, and the parts of ourselves that we literally hide in a straitjacket in the closet and never look at. No matter the topic, because the world is full of them, there's always going to be a team for it and there's always going to be a team against it. And I really, for me, it was like interesting looking at the spectrum of morality and, what that says about the kind of person we wish to be in the world. Because I realized a lot of my internal suffering from coaching was tied to who I thought I should be rather than who I was, and really coming home to the fact of why did I think I had to be this way? Like, where were these expectations coming from? Where was all of this judgment and shame coming from? And what was it really trying to show me? Like, what was it really trying to get me to see? Because initially, I didn't see shit. I had no awareness that I was even operating like this. And that there were things that were really triggering like strong emotional reactions to me that were tied to memories in my childhood or experiences, conversations, debates, um that really like caused me internal suffering and like had a lot of sort of like this repressed anger and like just sadness that I was just completely ignorant of, because I had done such a good job at like being full on in my morals that it just didn't matter. You know what I mean? It was black and white, like it was what it was to me. Why do we feel this compulsive need to pick a side? Like, it's so interesting because it's like almost in our nature, right? To like be on a team. Like we have this obsession with needing to be a part of something, to be on a side. And it like creates this sort of compulsive nature that we conform or we adopt ideas that we don't even agree with just because we're so desperate to be on a side. And depending on the side that you pick, it could be life or death. And the way that you interact with the world is largely influenced by the kaleidoscope of stances you hold that make up your identity. For example, we have groups of people that have the commonality of religion. Then you have the flip side of people who have the commonality of thinking that people that follow religion are stupid. You have groups of people that are all in love with meat and are meat lovers. And then you have the opposite of people that think that that's carnage. There's people that think like climate change is the number one priority. And if you don't believe it, you're an asshole. And then there's the people that think it's a legit conspiracy or have doubts in the data and what it actually means and represents. Depending on your rap sheet, your identity can then be classified further. Then you become a liberal or a conservative or a communist or a fascist. And the people that you agree with, you fuck with. You know what I mean? Like that's your crowd, that's your tribe. And the people that you disagree with, they can go fuck themselves. Like these are the people that are the scum of the earth. Like they're taking up space and resources when it should be going to the right side, your side. I realize, like, in doing this work, that our moral guides a lot of our emotional reactions and what we value. And a lot of that is really tied to our environment, how we were raised, and what's trending in the culture. it feels good to be on a side, but better yet, it feels amazing to be on the right side. It's like we're allergic to being the loser, and no matter where our ideas lie, we always believe that we are right and that we know, but they don't know. It's like this like internal bias of like we reaffirm our beliefs and reject the ideas of others that go against those. And it makes sense, some ideas are stupid, but it's just interesting that like we create such strong emotional and identity attachment to ideas, concepts, things that just are, because we are so attached to like what we think it should be, rather than just accepting it for what it is, which is again like this dichotomy between morals and presence. Our conviction blinds us and can result in like a perfectly kind, otherwise sane person committing acts of harm in the name of their beliefs. People will often say like, as much as Christianity is like the number one religion in the world, it's also committed the most bloodshed in the name of God. And it's just like, these are people that are all about, love and like acceptance of man, and God is the only one that's able to pass judgment, but end up being some of the most judgmental people on the planet. And it's all tied to our morals. And it stops us from being able to see clearly and see things as they are because we're so blinded by how we think it should be. I'm sure, like, for some, our attachment to inaccurate beliefs could be seen, as like a flaw of like being a human, because with this overflowing access to information, it is so easy to develop a stance on anything and give yourself the evidence to feel like an expert on how we should be. You could Google anything, right? Like, and you could Google any information that just backs up your point, whether it's right or wrong. It's just like easy to find information. And if you're the loudest one in the room, you end up being correct somehow. But despite the amount of information we have, like we're incapable of seeing through the facade of our beliefs and our attachment to our morality to see the world for what it is. It's like, again, like this interesting trick that we are so attached to how we see things that it's like really difficult to kind of go in the other direction and to just see it for what it is and not like impose our analysis and our assumptions onto anything, whether it be an object, a person. It's really, really hard to just let something be without like adding all of our experiential, pattern recognition knowledge on top of it. Like every human being, I have values, morals, ethics, like I have things that I believe are right and things that I believe are wrong. And being a part of a collective, it makes sense to have general rules about how we treat each other. Actions have consequences, but so do beliefs. For some people, abortions alone like can trigger anxiety, distaste, cringiness. Some people think it's wrong and for good reason. You're deciding to end a life, a point of consciousness, and the loss of life is painful. But I'm of the opinion that a woman should have the right to decide for herself because it's more complicated than that. Babies are a lot of work and responsibility, and not everybody is ready or in the right condition to support life. But still, people that view this as carnage have a really hard time seeing it differently. I noticed like my beliefs cause a lot of repressed anger. Anger that like it's interesting because I just never really viewed myself as a very angry person. I never really viewed myself as even like sad. I just consumed, I was fine. I was here, I was working, making things happen. Like I was, mentally healthy, it's fine. Everything's fine. But as I started to sort of like peel back the layers of like, what are the things that really bother me? Like, what are the things that just like make me feel so irritated? I realized like, holy shit, like there's a lot of repressed anger and sadness in this little girl that just like needed to be addressed. But I was so convinced in being right and being good that I couldn't even give myself the space to hear these parts of myself and to hear what they had to say, and to just like really witness the parts of myself that I was hiding from myself. And, when I have these sort of damning convictions, it's so easy to blame everybody else. It's so easy to say that it's them and not me, that they don't understand what I know. And climate change was like a really good example of that, because I hated anyone that didn't get it. Like, growing up on an island, especially one that bears the burden of being on the front lines of climate change, like for me, it was an issue of life or death. Like, rising sea levels was not made up. It was like reality of the day. Like, we were measuring these increases. We have data to show that the ice caps are melting, and like, my island is only so big, y'all. Like, it can only handle so much. And the fact that the world, or even my community, didn't view it as an emergency pissed me off so much. But at the same time, it filled me with so much anxiety, because I was like, fuck, like, my generation is going to be the one that has to deal with this mess. And like, it's so unfair, like, that it's our generation that has to deal with this. Like, it's just not right. Like, it's not fair. Like, and it just filled me like with rage, and these stories would just continue to perpetuate of like how unfair it was, and how like people were stupid and selfish, and they were what was wrong with the planet, and if like they were all just better, then like the world would be better. And anytime I met people that viewed the situation differently, it was like meeting an enemy in the flesh. Like, how could anybody not see that climate change was real? And like, arguing about the importance of climate change, oh, does that feel good? It feels so good to prove somebody wrong. Like, hell yeah, freaking idiot, like, stupid. Like, of course, fighting for the planet was a job of the Earth's heroes, and like, good people fight for the planet. And I'm a good person. So, of course, I'm going to fight for the planet. Like, duh. Um, and when I brought this up with my coach, because as you can see, like, there's just like a lot of passion and energy and anger that arises in this discussion, and anxiety that wasn't facing. I realized that this was all just partially rooted in this one topic, and like, that anger and anxiety had a lot more to say than just like, oh, we need to protect the planet. Like, fuck these people. And the only time I was able to even recognize that was when she asked me, why did I feel the need to save the planet? And at first, my impulse was like, what do you mean? Like, it's the planet. You know what I mean? Like, I love living here and I care about the damn turtles. So, like, obviously, anybody would care about the planet. Like, duh. Like, it's Earth. Like, are you kidding me? But being on that team that fought for the planet, I realized like it made me feel good. Like, it literally fed a part of my ego that came with this pleasurable response. And when we pick a side, we are often neglecting a part of ourselves, our shadows. It creates this cognitive dissonance within ourselves that we no longer address because we've picked a side. And we are so attached to that side that we're not even willing to look and even engage in the topic of like what parts of ourselves are actually in line with the opposite side. Illuminating your shadows can be very tricky because it's hard to be aware of something you're not aware of. Like, it's really hard to ask yourself questions that it's just not in your nature to think about, because you're so good at playing into the roles that you're attached to. When we pick the winning side, we neglect the gifts our failures have to teach us, and we shame any behavior that doesn't align with who we think we are, and we pretend to be something we're not. In the case of climate change, I neglected my own materialist tendencies. I drive a car that uses gas for work. I consume electricity that's not always based on renewables. I create waste. And the point isn't to judge your shadows, but to love them, to have compassion for them, to not see them as the bad guy, but just to see them as part of you, and to love them so that you can integrate these parts of yourself back into the whole. So it's no longer a tug of war, but just a warm embrace. When you love the neglected parts of your self identity, you learn a lot about the seeds that were planted in the soil of your mind. And with mindfulness, you can question their validity and gain a deeper insight into your inner wisdom that allows you to see things holistically. Plus, it's very cathartic. Very, very cathartic. When you do this practice, you realize that you and your enemies are more alike than different. circumstances? Is it really the only thing that puts you on one side of the idea and them on the other side? But when we love our shadows, we don't see anyone as our enemy. Rather, we're able to stay present in the moment with the person in front of us and have empathy and compassion for where they are in life, and not let their ideas compromise how we react, even if we disagree. It means that we have reverence and love for our imperfections and accept that love is being patient with ourselves and others. That was such a hard thing for me to recognize, that love is patience. Oh my God, guys. Like, love is patience. Like, it is so crazy because it's like, okay, in this journey, right, of life that you're in right now, like you're working on yourself, you're trying to grow, you're trying to do all of these big man things. Nobody, like, the universe is not rushing you. It's not like, oh, boo, like you're running out of time, like get it together, like you're nowhere close to enlightenment yet. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Waste of space. Like, no, no, no. Like, the universe lets you have your experience without judgment, good or bad in the eyes of others. It lets you exist and be. It lets you make mistakes. It lets you fall down. It lets you pick yourself back up. It is patient with you. And that's love. Like, it's not out to tell you that you're doing anything wrong. It's just there for you to explore and find yourself. And like, I feel like a lot of the time when we have these morals on ourselves, it makes parts of ourselves unlovable, and we're no longer patient with them, and we like develop this sort of just like very dismissive relationship with these parts of ourselves that just deserve to be loved because they are who we are, and we're just repressing them because we have made ourselves to believe that they are not worthy of love, but they are. When we are patient with ourselves in our own journey, it allows us to not see a world of fuck ups, but a world of growth, of people transforming every single day. But they're doing it at their own pace in alignment with the universe symphony of life and consciousness. It's not about it going our way, it is just going in its way, in its direction. But when we're able to be patient in our own healing journeys, when we're patient with ourselves, through everything that we experience, it gives us more capacity to have compassion and empathy for others that are also going through the same thing. So even the difficult relationships that you have with people that you love, and it's just really, really hard because they're not living up to your expectations, they're not meeting your needs. If you really love them unconditionally, be patient, because there are tons of people that have been patient with you and that are being patient with you. And you need to be able to do that for yourself, because you didn't have it all in one day. It took time. And when we recognize the journey for what it is, we're able to give ourselves space to really experience the fullness of it, rather than trying to have it be a certain way and have it come out a certain way that it causes us so much emotion, because it's just like not falling in alignment with our expectations, and we suffer needlessly. And you don't need to do that. You really don't need to do that. Like, you don't need to be so hard on yourself. You do not need to bear this burden at all. I say all of this to say that the topics that trigger strong emotional reactions in you, whether it be climate change, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ rights, gun rights, abortions, whatever, we should question what our aversion to our enemies really says about us. I know, crazy, because it's like, fuck them, right? What do you mean? What does it say about us? We're the good guy, like, fuck them. But no, what does your aversion to your enemy really say about you? I don't see having beliefs as flaws, because they're an opportunity for self expression, and it really fills our need to be a part of. Our beliefs make us relatable, they connect us to one another. But when we take them too seriously, it tricks us into thinking that we're all different from one another, that there are walls between us when there really is nothing but space. Our beliefs trick our minds into fabricating stories, making assumptions, and setting expectations that end up isolating us and harming others. We suffer in silence, convinced that we are doing just work. But are we? Our role in this world is not to fix the world. I know, freaking crazy. It's to expand our awareness through the self. In doing so, you cultivate compassion within. And you do this by loving all of your demons, loving the fuck out of them. You become truly empathic by seeing yourself in your enemy. And it doesn't mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you don't fight for what's important to you. It doesn't mean that you're lawless and you lack boundaries. It's seeing your attachment to these ideas for what they are and the role that we play when we accept them into our worldview. It's managing what lies in front of you from a place of mindfulness rather than getting caught up in an emotional spiral about issues going on in a country you've never even been to. Act local, but think global. Often our minds get caught up in the size of the journey, and we forget that all we really have to do is just take the first step. The goal is to improve your mental clarity. Often our morality can be one of the hardest things to settle because we are so accustomed to moving through the world in non-duality. Getting present allows you to step into oneness and see you and your experiences as a point of connection, a point of attention for the universe. It allows us to see past the roles we're playing and have acceptance. This way, you are no longer fighting life, but are grooving along with it. Nothing can shake you. Even the worst, craziest news, even the most abomination, like any crap, you're just like, oh Lord. None of it can shake you. Because you see it for what it is, rather than holding on to what you expect it to be. It's when the entire world becomes your extended family. And they're no longer just strangers walking about that you loathe. You're no longer just blindly following, but you are a free agent, no longer bound to the chains of the mind. What would your life look like if you were no longer fighting it? No longer fighting your urges, no longer fighting the voices within you that just want to be heard and loved. It's okay to surrender. It's okay to let go. There is no winner or loser. There is just you. Remember,